The weather in Tacoma has always been strange. Sometimes the rain hits so hard, you forget there's even a world outside. And if you're alone, that rain starts to feel more like a creepy background score. My name's Ethan Harrow, and I'd just come back home for summer break from university. Our old house, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, looked even more deserted that rainy afternoon. Big trees surrounded the place, and every drop of water hitting the leaves felt like some silent witness from the past. When I unlocked the front gate and pushed open the rusted door, a musty, almost rotten smell hit me right in the face. The house had clearly been shut for a while. The wooden door felt damp, and the windows were coated in layers of dust. My mom was working the night shift again. She's a nurse and had been pulling doubles for the past couple of weeks. Dad passed away 7 years ago, and now it was just me and a few fading memories of this place. As I stepped inside, I thought the silence would be comforting. But instead, I felt this strange unease, like someone had watched me walk in. It took me a few hours to get the house in order, dusted things off, checked the fridge, completely empty, and noticed the lights flickering oddly, like the wiring. Couldn't decide how much light it wanted to give off. The rain outside had picked up. I kept telling myself this was just a quiet house, but under my skin was this slow, crawling feeling, like something was watching me even now. I dropped my bag in my old room. Everything looked the same wall paint, the same desk, the books I'd left behind. Rain was hitting the window pane in steady rhythm, but I noticed one drop. Just one, moving in the opposite direction, like a finger had drawn a swirl from the outside. I ignored it. As I unpacked, I thought I heard soft footsteps down the hallway, like bare feet on old wood. I turned around. No one. The sound was so faint that my mind almost convinced me it didn't happen. It's probably just the floorboards creaking from the moisture, I told myself. But something was still off, like something hiding, just in the corners of my eyes that I couldn't quite catch. Then I noticed the old man from across the street staring directly at me from his window. I'd never really looked at him before. My mom used to mention him, said his name was Mr. Clark, lived here for years. But the way he stared, it was like his eyes held on too long. I pulled the curtain, but the chill down my back lingered for a while. By evening, the house felt heavier. The rain slammed against the tin roof so hard, it started to sound like slow, deliberate footsteps climbing stairs. Nobody had turned on any music, but there was this strange vibration in the walls, like a song was trying to play but couldn't find the right notes. Around 10:30 p.m., I turned off the lights and got into bed. There was this quiet kind of fear, the kind you feel when you know you're alone, but still sense someone else is there. Just as I started to drift off, a flash of light blinked from the porch outside. It wasn't lightning. It was pale blue, like a camera flash. My heartbeat stopped for a second. I got up and went to the window. Nothing. Just rain and a little fog. I turned on the porch light. It flickered once, then died. I stood there for a moment, trying to steady my breath. And then, I thought I saw faint finger trails along the porch railing. I got back into bed, but sleep never came. My eyes were shut, but my mind was stuck on one question. Was someone out there, or had someone already been inside this whole time? That first night in Tacoma, what should have been the start of a peaceful break, had turned into something else. Something I couldn't quite explain. And maybe, something I wouldn't be able to escape from anytime soon. When I woke up the next morning, that same heaviness was still in the air, a coldness that felt more like the rain outside than the air inside the room. I tried to convince myself that whatever I saw or heard the night before was probably just a lightning flash, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. My head was aching, and sleep had come only in broken pieces. I kept telling myself it was just exhaustion, the weather messing with me. But the silence in the room and the dampness on the walls were telling a different story. Then my mom called from the hospital. Her voice carried the same tiredness, the same quiet concern she always tried to hide. I told her everything was fine, that the house was opened up and I was settling in. But the lie didn't sit well. My voice had a slight tremble I couldn't mask. She asked, "Did you sleep okay?" I said, "Yeah, the rain helped." Before hanging up, she simply said, "If anything feels off, tell me. That house, it's not the same anymore." That one line sent a chill down my spine, but I tried not to overthink it. Maybe she meant something else. When I walked into the living room, I noticed the blanket I had thrown over the couch the night before had different folds, as if someone had sat there and got up without fixing it. It was subtle, but I couldn't unsee it. I quietly straightened it out, but a seed of doubt had already been planted. Had I come downstairs in my sleep, or was it someone else? By evening, the rain had started again, heavier this time. The sky looked darker than before, and the air carried a strange stillness, like even the weather was hiding something. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a light tap-tap on the window. It was so faint someone might have said, "It's just the rain," but it didn't sound like rain. It sounded like a fingertip, like someone was gently testing to see if I was inside. I walked slowly to the window. Looked out, nothing, just rain and a strange quiet fog. Across the street, Mr. Clark's house still looked empty. And even though no one was there, I felt like I was being watched from someplace I couldn't quite see. I quickly shut the curtain, but that tap-tap was still echoing in my head. I grabbed the flashlight and decided to step outside. As soon as I opened the door, a freezing gust of wind slammed into my chest, cold enough to hit straight through. I turned on the porch light, and it blinked twice before dying out. My breathing sped up. I stepped onto the porch slowly, the rain soaking straight through my clothes. I pointed the flashlight toward the ground near the window, and I saw a faint mud mark. Not a full footprint, but like someone had stepped there with wet shoes and barely pressed down. It was right under the window, exactly where I heard the sound. I shut off the flashlight and tried to tell myself, maybe I made that mark while walking around. But deep down I knew. I never stepped near that window. Back inside, I locked the door, both locks, even the chain. Still, I didn't feel safe. I wasn't even hungry. I made a simple sandwich, grabbed a glass of water, and headed to my room. The entire room felt unnaturally cold. No fan, no AC, but the walls were cold. Like someone else's breath had been lingering there. I got into bed. Whenever I'm scared, I shut my eyes tight and bury my face in the pillow, like hearing something is worse than seeing it. And then, at 2:14 a.m., when the whole house was dead quiet, I heard a soft whistle outside the window. It wasn't a tune, it wasn't the wind. It was clear, slow, like something out of an old horror movie, just meant to get your attention. I shut my eyes tighter, my whole body froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And after the whistle, complete silence. That silence was louder than the rain, scarier than the whistle. And in that moment, I realized fear isn't always outside. Sometimes, it's already inside your room. And it just waits at the window, asking for permission to come in. When I woke up that morning, I could still hear that whistling sound from the night before echoing in my ears. The rain still hadn't stopped outside, and a thick layer of condensation had formed on the window pane. I went downstairs slowly, and as soon as I opened the door, my eyes landed on the porch doormat. It was slightly moved. Barely noticeable, but clear enough to show someone had stepped on it. I froze. I just stood there, staring at that mat, wondering, was it the wind? Or did someone actually come by last night? I immediately picked up my phone and called Mr. Clark, the elderly neighbor across the street. I didn't tell him much, just asked directly, "Did you see anything last night?" After a few seconds of silence, his voice came through, low but firm. someone was standing outside your house. My heart skipped a beat. I asked, someone? Like, a person? He only said, I saw a shadow. It stood there for a long time, didn't move. A chill ran down my spine. Clark paused, then said, You're alone right now, aren't you? I didn't answer. He continued, Something similar happened a few years ago, just 3 houses down. A boy lived alone. His mom was a nurse. One night, he saw something at the window, and after that, his voice cracked. Next morning, he was just gone. The door was locked from the inside. After that call, my breathing grew heavier. For the first time, I felt a fear that wasn't just in my head. It had taken over my whole body. I checked and locked every door and window in the house, added the chain locks and bolts too, held a flashlight in one hand, pulled the curtains tight with the other. But still, it felt like someone was already inside, someone I hadn't seen, but who had already seen me. The rain was pouring harder than ever. Outside the window, there was only fog and water. Visibility was 0. Even Mr. Clark's house was completely dark now. It felt like the whole neighborhood had fallen into some deep sleep, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. The lights flickered twice, sudden white flashes turning my house into a horror movie frame for just a second. The fear had grown so much that I turned off all the lights in the house, leaving only the kitchen light on. So if someone was watching from the dark, they'd think I was in there. About 30 minutes later, while I was sitting upstairs, I heard a faint sound from the kitchen, like a spoon hitting the floor. It was such a small noise, anyone would say, something probably slipped. But when you're alone and already scared, even the smallest sound feels like an explosion. I crept downstairs, flashlight in hand, and looked toward the kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. The plates were untouched. The glass in the sink was still where I'd left it. But on the floor, there was a spoon. I picked it up, but my hands were shaking. I tried to remember, did I use one last night? No, I only drank a glass of water, and that glass was still upstairs. So where did this spoon come from? How did it fall? I stood there at the kitchen doorway for a while, completely still. And then, I felt it. Someone's gaze, directly on the window. I slowly turned my head to look, and for the first time, I actually saw something. Through the rainy fog outside the window, something was standing completely still. Tall, thin, absolutely motionless. I couldn't tell if it was a person or just a shadow, because it didn't move at all. Just stood there, like it was watching me, understanding my every move. Its posture was too perfect, too deliberate, like it knew I'd be afraid. And it had shown up only to feed that fear. I stood frozen for what felt like minutes, holding my breath. And then, that figure slowly faded into the fog, without moving, without a sound. That's when I knew this wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the thunder. It wasn't my tired mind. Someone was there. And maybe they weren't outside anymore. When I looked out the window again the next morning, the figure that had been standing outside last night was gone. There was nothing but rain, and its cold, endless sound. But my mind had started to pick up something. Beyond that noise, something that didn't feel right. I stared at the window for a long time, maybe hoping I'd see that thing again. Or maybe because the fear had settled so deep inside me that my eyes just couldn't let go. I kept telling myself it was probably just a shadow. Maybe something looked strange because of the rain. But the more I tried to reassure myself, the more my mind kept repeating, you saw something. Something that shouldn't have been there. I went back upstairs and sat on my bed. A little while later, my mom called from the hospital. She noticed how tired my voice sounded, but I didn't say much. Just told her everything at the house was fine, and the rain was getting heavy. She didn't ask too many questions, maybe because she was exhausted too, or maybe she could sense I was hiding something. But before hanging up, she said something strange. The walls in that house. They've gotten damp lately, haven't they? Sometimes, old things get trapped in that dampness. That line stuck with me. Like a voice from the past had clung to something wet and wouldn't let go. The next morning, when I went down to the dining room, the first thing I noticed was a chair, slightly out of place. Not by much, maybe half an inch, but just enough that if you lived in that house every day, you'd know something had changed. I stood there staring at it. I hadn't touched any chair the night before, and when I looked closely, there was a thin layer of dust under the legs and a clean drag mark through it, like someone had carefully pulled it out. I slowly walked up to the chair and crouched down. That's when I saw it, fingerprints in the dust, clear ones. 5 little fingers like a child's, but not fully grown. The weirdest part? They were perfectly clean, no smudge, no blur. As if someone had pressed their hand down very deliberately. My throat started to dry up. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking. I checked every single door and window in the house again, all locked, bolts in place. Nothing broken, no signs of entry. But then the real question hit. If no one came in, how did that chair move? And whose fingerprints were those? I went upstairs again and locked my bedroom door. The rain hadn't stopped. In fact, it had turned into a full-blown storm. The streets outside were flooded, and the local news said the roads around this area were closed. I was truly stuck in a house where something wasn't right, and no help could reach me. I tried keeping myself busy, reading a book, watching something on my laptop, but my brain kept circling back to that chair, those fingerprints, and that figure outside the window. By evening, I was so exhausted that I just lay in bed. But sleep now felt like a luxury, something people like me didn't get anymore. And then, around 10:47 p.m., while I was scrolling through my phone, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "Why didn't you answer the door, Ethan?" I froze. My fingers stopped moving. My throat went dry. I stared at the message again. The number wasn't saved. No name, no previous messages. And the most terrifying part? I never heard the door. Or maybe I did hear it, and I just chose to ignore it. The text on my phone, "Why didn't you answer the door, Ethan?" kept echoing in my head like a hammer, striking over and over. For a few seconds, I stood there frozen, holding my phone. My breath felt stuck, and my whole body was soaked in sweat. At that point, fear wasn't just a feeling anymore. It had taken over my mind, my thoughts. I got up and went straight to the living room. Nothing felt normal anymore. My hands were shaking, but I quickly dialed 911. When the call connected, I told them everything: the text message, the figure from last night, the whistling at the window, the moved chair, the fingerprints. Everything. About 20 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up. They listened carefully to each detail, checked the windows, examined the dining room chair, and wrote down the number from the text. But everything was so subtle, there wasn't any solid evidence. One of them asked, "Did you record anything? Any photos?" I shook my head. He said, "Next time, if anything weird happens, try to record it. A video, a photo, anything we can hold on to, so we have something to work with." After they left, the house felt even emptier, like whatever that thing was had been hiding while they were here, and now it was just waiting to come out again. I remembered Mom once said there was an old camera in the storage room. Maybe I could use that. I went down to the basement, and digging through old boxes, I found a small digital camera, dusty, slightly rusted, but it still looked functional. There was even a battery nearby, and luckily, it had some charge. I brought the camera upstairs. But right as I got to the living room, I glanced out the window and noticed the old stepladder in the backyard was gone. It was always kept leaning against the back fence, but now there was just a dusty outline where it used to be. My breath caught. Someone had been out there, taken the ladder, and left without making a sound. Or maybe they hadn't left at Then suddenly, the rain stopped. Not slowly fading away like usual, but instantly. Everything just went silent. No wind, no raindrops, no rustling trees. It felt like someone had hit the mute button on the world. Inside the house, I could feel a strange vibration in the walls, like they were breathing. I sat slowly on the couch and turned the camera on. The moment it powered up, it showed the last picture taken, a photo that came up automatically when the screen lit. It was a picture of the porch, taken at night. Maybe from last night. Or the night before. But here's the thing, I never took that picture. In the photo, light rain was falling frozen midair by the camera's flash. I started to zoom in, and that's when I saw it. In one corner of the porch, someone was sitting. Their knees were pulled up to their chest, and their face was buried between their legs. It was a person, thin, completely still. You couldn't see the face, but their presence almost pushed out of the screen, sitting heavy on my chest. I stared at the photo for a long time. Each time I zoomed in, it felt like they got closer. And then the camera screen started flickering like the battery was dying. Except I knew the battery was full. It was clear now. This wasn't just someone hanging around outside the house. They'd made it in. And they weren't hiding anymore. They were waiting, sitting there, face hidden between their knees in complete silence. Not outside the window, but somewhere inside. I had looked at that photo over and over, each time zooming in a little more, hoping to notice something new. The camera screen was small, but what I saw was enough to keep me up at night. That figure crouched in the corner of the porch, completely still, face hidden between its knees. Even though it was just an image, its presence felt like it was floating in the air around me. But the most terrifying part, when I checked the timestamp on the photo, it said 2:14 a.m., the exact time I heard that strange whistling outside my window that night. My heart sank. That meant the photo was taken while I was curled up in bed, scared. But who took it? The camera wasn't even on at that time. I had my phone in hand. So who took the picture? And why? I thought about telling someone, but then stopped. I couldn't tell my mom, she was already exhausted. And if I told my friends, they'd just think I was overthinking or hallucinating. But this wasn't in my head. The picture, the timestamp, the chair, the message, they were all connected. And it was all happening quietly, without breaking anything, without making a sound. I knew I needed more security. I grabbed my laptop and tried setting up the old indoor camera system I found in storage. Out of 4 cameras, only 2 still worked. One pointed at the hallway leading to the upstairs rooms, and one facing the front door from the living room. At least I had something to monitor the silence now. That night, I went to bed more cautious than ever. I locked the door from the inside, kept my phone charging in my hand like it was some sort of weapon, and turned off the lights. I left the hallway camera feed running on the laptop. Around 3 a.m., I suddenly heard static like the broken signal sound from an old TV. I jumped up and checked the laptop. The camera feed had gone blurry for a few seconds, then slowly cleared up. The hallway looked empty. No movement, no sound. I stared at it for a while, but everything seemed normal again. I sighed in relief and lay back down. But the moment I did, I heard it right outside my door. A soft, slow knuckle tap, 3 gentle knocks. Not like someone trying to come in, but more like someone just letting me know, I'm here. I didn't move a muscle. I lay perfectly still. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure it could be heard through the door. The knocking didn't come again. But now I knew something was out there. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was close. I didn't sleep all night. I kept my eyes open, listening to every sound. I even checked under the door for shadows. Nothing moved. But the fear had rooted itself inside me now. The next morning, as soon as sunlight crept into my room, I got up and reviewed the hallway camera footage. At exactly 3:02 a.m., in the middle of that silent hallway. A faint shadow crossed from one side to the other, no footsteps. It wasn't fully human tall, light, almost smoke-like. And it didn't touch the ground, it seemed to float across the hallway. Now the question wasn't, is something here? The question was, what is it? And how long is this going to keep happening? It was early morning, and I was standing in the kitchen making coffee. I had barely slept a few hours the night before, but I was still on high alert. That's when I noticed the basement door. It was slightly open. I froze. My mind immediately jumped back. I had definitely shut that door last night, just like I always do. I even locked it. The lock on that door is old, but it makes a distinct noise when it opens or closes. And I hadn't heard a thing all night. I slowly started walking toward the door, leaving my coffee on the counter behind me. As I moved closer, memories of my childhood rushed back, how I used to be scared of the basement. The walls down there were always damp, and it had this strange smell, like wet wood and old plaster. My dad never let me go down there alone. He'd always say that part of the house isn't really part of the house. It's just storage, stay away from it. I didn't get it back then. Now I think I do. I grabbed a flashlight and gathered the nerve to go down the stairs. As soon as I reached the bottom, that familiar musty smell hit me. In the flashlight's beam, I saw the usual old cardboard boxes, dark green mold on the walls, and in one corner, a broken wooden rocking chair. It wasn't moving, but it looked like someone had just been sitting in it. The seat had no dust on it, everything else did, but not that spot. I shined the flashlight into one of the boxes and found some old papers and books. One of the books stood out. It had a torn cover and gave off a weird, almost chemical smell. I pulled it out. It was a diary, but it didn't have any dates or stories inside. Instead, it had just one line written over and over again on every page. Don't leave the door unlocked. Don't leave the door unlocked. The strange part was, it wasn't all written in the same handwriting. It looked like different people had written it at different times. For a moment, it felt like what I was holding wasn't just a diary but a warning. Not just for me, but for anyone who ever left that door open. I rushed back upstairs, but when I got to my room, I noticed my phone was dead. The battery had been at 80% the night before, and I had left it charging. But now, the charger was unplugged. On its own. I'm the only one in this house. Did I unplug it? I couldn't remember. But if not me, then who? Outside, the rain had started again, but this time it felt wrong. The wind was banging against the windows, and every gust felt like it was shaking the whole house. The power kept flickering, and with every flash, the shadows in the room changed, like the walls were moving. I tried to close the curtains and head back to my room, but as I passed through the hallway, I heard a weird sound from the vent. It wasn't a whistle, just a soft, focused exhale, like someone gently blowing air through the pipes. I stopped and stared at the vent for a while, but the sound didn't come again. Maybe it was just the wind, but it felt too deliberate, too intentional. When I got back to my room, something felt off. The table was slightly shifted forward. The chair was turned just a little. Nothing obvious, but the kind of subtle change you only notice when you know a space like your own. Even the bed looked slightly indented, like someone had sat there for a while. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. It felt like every wall was whispering something now soft, slow, and all repeating the same sentence. Don't leave the door unlocked. I couldn't take it anymore. When your room starts changing little by little, when doors open on their own, and when it feels like someone is counting every breath you take, staying quiet starts to feel like insanity. I was panicked, but fully sure of one thing now. I had to call 911 again. This time, I didn't hold anything back. As soon as the call connected, I said, I'm not alone in this house. There's someone here. Someone who doesn't want me to see them, but they're everywhere. My voice was shaking, but the truth was crystal clear. The dispatcher's voice came through. "Calm down, sir. Can you describe what you're seeing?" But right as I was about to answer, the line filled with static followed by a strange distortion. It sounded like someone else had cut in. The call didn't disconnect, but the voices became garbled, like something was tampering with the line. Or someone. I panicked and hung up, then immediately pulled up the hallway camera footage to rewind. I had made up my mind, if anything weird happened again, I'd record it. The timestamp showed around 2:17 a.m. As soon as the footage played, my heart started racing. The hallway was empty at first. 1 second. 2 seconds. And then suddenly, a blurry human figure appeared walking straight down the hallway toward my bedroom door. And then, it just stood there. The scariest part, it didn't knock, it didn't move. It just stood silently, like it was looking inside. And then, in the very next frame, it was gone. No movement, no sign of it leaving. Just gone. That's when I knew I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I ran out the front door and headed straight for Mr. Clark's place. The rain had picked up again, and the cold wind hit my face like knives. I reached his porch, rang the bell. Twice, 3 times, but no one answered. The door was shut, the windows completely dark. Either he wasn't home or worse, he was home, but didn't want to open the door. When I returned to my house, the police had already arrived responding to my earlier call. 2 officers, 1 woman, and 1 older man. They searched everything: basement, attic, backyard, every door and window, even the camera wiring. But they didn't find anything. After the search, the older officer, his eyes full of both experience and fatigue, stood in front of me and said, "If someone was here, they're gone now. We can increase surveillance, but you'll need to be prepared too." There was no panic in his voice, just a kind of detachment, like he believed I was going through some kind of breakdown. And there was nothing he could really do to help. Once the police left, the house felt empty all over again. The lights were on, but the brightness didn't bring any comfort. I was sitting in my room when my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. The message read, "You shouldn't have called them, Ethan." This time, my whole body went cold. My fingers froze on the phone screen. Whoever this was, they weren't just watching, they were listening. They knew I had called the police. They knew I was scared, and maybe they knew exactly what I was going to do next. Everything inside the house started to look different to me now. Every corner, every door, every old piece of furniture, it all felt like it was hiding something. Some part of a story I'd never really noticed before. One afternoon, in the middle of that restless feeling, I decided to clean out an old cabinet at the end of the hallway. I thought maybe it would help distract me. Behind the cabinet, under layers of dust and cobwebs, something was tucked away. When I pulled it out, I found an old, dusty family photo album, a brown book with mold on the cover and worn-out pages. I brought it back to my room and slowly started flipping through the pages. At first, it was all normal pictures of my mom, dad, me. Old picnic shots, family moments. But then, a few pages in, I came across one photo that stopped me. It showed me my mom, my dad, and another boy, around 10 years old, standing next to us. His face was completely unfamiliar. But what really unsettled me was how naturally he stood there, like he belonged. His hand was on my shoulder, and my parents were smiling like it was all perfectly normal. I stared at that picture for a long time. This wasn't a joke. That boy didn't look like someone who just joined us for a photo. He looked like he was part of the family. And yet, my mind couldn't recall anything about him. Later that day, I called my mom and held the photo up to the camera. I asked her, "Mom, who is this?" She paused for a few seconds, then softly said, "Maybe a neighbor's kid? I don't really remember, Ethan." But her expression looked off, like she was hiding something. Or trying not to remember. That night I had the same dream again. One about the basement. The same dark stairs, the broken rocking chair. But this time, I was walking down the steps myself. And in that silence, I wasn't alone. I could hear footsteps, soft, slow ones following me down. Even in the dream, I knew something was behind me. And suddenly, in real life, I heard footsteps too in my room. I shot awake. My heart was pounding like it wanted to jump out of my chest. I turned the light on and looked around. No one. But the door to my room, it was slightly open. I knew I'd closed it before going to bed. Just then, a loud car alarm went off outside. It was my mom's old car, the one that hadn't moved in years. I ran out. The car was shut, locked, everything in place, but the alarm, it had gone off on its own. I turned it off and came back inside. That's when I noticed the mirror in my room, the one facing the window. There, on the fogged-up surface, a word was smeared in what looked like mud. Remember. I just stood there. The fear inside me had shifted into something deeper, like a quiet, haunting anxiety. Remember. Remember what? Was there something I'd forgotten, or something someone didn't want me to remember? Now it wasn't just fear, it was mystery. And it felt like it was tied directly to my life. I stood there for a while, just staring at the mirror. At that word written in what looked like mud, remember, and it felt like it hit something deep inside me. Slowly, I picked up a tissue to wipe it off, but as I rubbed the glass, I noticed something strange. The word wasn't written on the surface, it was written behind the glass, like it was from the inside. That realization sent a chill straight down my spine. I kept staring at the mirror for several seconds. And then I made a decision. It was time to search the entire house. I went room by room, starting with the basement, where the old rocking chair still sat exactly as before. Then the attic, which felt oddly tense despite the silence, and the cobwebs. Every corner, every closet, every window. I checked everything. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. When I was done, I came back to my room, exhausted, and picked up my phone. There was a notification for a new voicemail. I played it, and what I heard stopped me cold. There were no voices, just the sound of me breathing in my sleep. Slow, steady breathing, recorded in the quiet of my own bedroom. But the terrifying part, at one point, there was another breath, not mine. It was closer, like someone else was breathing right next to the phone. That's when I thought of Mr. Clark. Maybe he was back. I rushed over to his house, but it was still dark, still quiet. The door was closed, and there were no signs of anyone inside. It started to feel like he had just disappeared, or someone had quietly made him disappear. I came back home, anxious and worn out, when something strange happened. I was moving some old boxes in the storage room when I noticed a crack in the wall behind a cabinet, and looking closer, I saw it was actually a small hidden door. Old wooden, barely big enough for a child. But I had no memory of it ever being there. I slowly opened it. Behind it was a narrow wooden passage, lost in darkness. Maybe it led to the basement, or somewhere else. I hesitated. But my fear was now mixed with curiosity I couldn't ignore. I picked up a flashlight and pointed it into the passage. And that's when I heard it. A deep, quiet breath coming from inside. I froze. My hand started to shake. The flashlight beam flickered against the tight walls. Someone was in there, someone human, or something else. I couldn't move. Out of panic, I turned the flashlight off, and right then, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate ones coming toward the door, like whoever it was knew I was there. Waiting. Then, silence. And from the other side of the door, I heard a quiet, clear, and strangely familiar voice say, "I've been here longer than you know." I couldn't move. It was like time stopped. That one sentence shook me to the core. It meant this wasn't something new. Whatever this was, it had been here long before me. Maybe even before anyone knew. I couldn't live with the fear anymore. The idea that someone else was breathing with me inside this house. That small, hidden door and the darkness behind it had become a mystery I needed to solve. So that night, once the rain had stopped, I picked up my flashlight, slowly opened the door, and stepped into that narrow wooden tunnel. Right away, a strange smell hit me, like old, damp wood and forgotten toys. Every step made the floor creak under my feet, and spiderwebs clung to the walls like no one had been down there for years. As I walked deeper, I started noticing things scattered along the path. An old teddy bear with one missing eye, a tiny blue child's shoe, and then a crumpled piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "We don't go past the chair. He gets angry." I stood there, holding that note, looking around. This place didn't just feel scary anymore. It felt like it held someone's pain, like pieces of a story left behind. There were chalk marks on the walls, long lines like someone had been counting days. Or maybe moments they were stuck down here. Some were crossed out, some had the word "cry" scratched under them. It felt like the sadness and fear of a child still lived inside those narrow walls. After walking about 15 feet, I saw a small wooden door. I pushed it open and was stunned. I had come out on the other side of the basement. The same basement I could enter from inside the house. But no one had ever told me about this passage. That's when the terrifying truth hit me. If someone could get inside from that hidden tunnel, they'd never need to use the front door dock. Just as I stepped forward, a cold gust of air brushed across the back of my neck, and my whole body froze. I quickly turned my flashlight back toward the tunnel, but there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Still, I was certain someone had been there, maybe still was. Watching me from the dark dot, my breathing got heavier, my heart was racing. The tight space started to mess with my head. I felt claustrophobic, like I was the one trapped now. I ran without stopping, bursting out of that closet door and slamming it shut behind me. Breathing hard, I stumbled back into my room. I turned on every light, closed the windows, locked the door, and sat on the bed. Just the thought of that hidden tunnel sent a chill down my spine. But I kept telling myself, maybe tonight would be quiet. Maybe it was over, but as the night dragged on and I was just starting to fall asleep, I heard a soft scratching sound from under my bed, like something or someone was trying to crawl out. The sound of fingernails slowly dragging against the wood. It was steady, broken up, but clear. I just sat there frozen. I didn't dare look. This time it wasn't just fear. This time, it felt like whatever it was right there. Too close. Time had started to blur for me. The line between day and night had disappeared. It felt like I was trapped in some strange timeline, where something or someone was always nearby, but never seen. I couldn't tell anymore if what I was seeing was real, or just hallucinations. But did it even matter? When fear starts to feel real, even if it's imagined, it still has the power to break you. One night when I went to the bathroom, I saw something written on the mirror again. This time, it appeared in the steam. It said, "I see you." My throat went dry. The window was shut. No one else was in there. But the words showed up exactly where I had been standing. The message was clear: someone was watching me. All the time. Every word, even during the day. Things didn't feel normal anymore. Every time I went to the kitchen, I noticed something missing. A slice of bread would be gone, the juice half drunk, the fridge left open. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. But when it kept happening, I knew I wasn't alone in the house. One night I heard the dining chair slide across the floor. I froze, slowly turned around, and my eyes locked on it. The chair was moving, just slightly, like someone had pushed it and let go. Now I didn't just doubt the sounds, I doubted everything that moved. Another night, I was sitting in my room, when the TV turned on by itself. No channel, just static. But in the middle of that static, I could hear a faint breathing sound. I walked closer and turned up the volume. The breathing got deeper. Like someone was right on the other side of the screen, staring back at me through the static. Even the walls didn't feel silent anymore. One day, I was sitting in the hallway, completely exhausted, and leaned my head near a vent. That's when I heard a whisper come from inside. "You were never alone." The words didn't just enter my ears. It felt like they were planted inside me. And that same evening, I finally saw Mr. Clark on his porch. It had been days. I ran outside to talk to him, but he wasn't the same. His face looked pale and sick, his eyes sunken in. He didn't say a word, just stared at me. But his eyes held a kind of fear that said everything he knew. He understood now. But maybe he just couldn't explain it. I came back home and decided I was going to leave every light on tonight. But I was so tired, my eyes started to close on their own. I lay in bed, looking up, and froze. Right above me, hanging from the ceiling fan, was a shadowy figure. It looked like someone had tied themselves to the fan. I couldn't see the face, just a dark outline, slowly swaying with the motion of the blades. I jumped up and turned the light on. The room was empty. The fan kept spinning. The walls stayed quiet. But what I saw in those few seconds became real for me. And now I was sure it's still here. It never left. Maybe it never had to. That morning when I opened the door, a light rain was still falling and the air felt heavy with dampness. Sitting quietly on the porch was a brown envelope. No name, no sound, no doorbell, no knock. I picked it up and brought it inside. It felt light in my hands, but what was inside was going to weigh heavy. The first thing I saw when I opened it was a photocopy of Mr. Clark's journal. Faded writing on white pages, and his name written in the corner in his own shaky handwriting, like someone had passed it along quickly, maybe desperately. I didn't know if Clark had sent it himself, but he hadn't spoken in weeks. Or maybe someone else wanted me to read it. As I started going through it, page by page, a dark story began to unfold. Clark wrote that for the last 10 years, he'd heard slow footsteps circling his house every night. Sometimes, he said, he could hear a child's whisper saying things like, "Please unlock the door," or softly repeating someone's name over and over. Then came the real twist. Clark wrote that back in 1998. In the very house I now lived in, a little boy had locked himself in the basement. Clark was just the neighbor then. He said he'd heard the kids screaming at night, but when the police finally came, the basement was empty. The boy was never found. His name was Lucas Harrow. My head started spinning. I ran to my laptop and pulled up the local library's digital archives. Within minutes, I found the old newspaper story, 10-year-old Lucas Harrow, gone. Missing from this exact property, and the photo in the article? It matched the one I saw in the old family album. Me, my mom, and that unknown boy I asked her about. The one she'd called just a neighbor's kid. My hand started shaking. He wasn't just some kid. I was sure now he was my brother. Lucas Harrow, my little brother. But if that was true, why had Mom never mentioned him? Why didn't we ever remember him? Or worse, did he never actually leave? I immediately called my mom. The phone rang, connected. "Mom, who was Lucas?" I asked. There was silence, then static, then the call dropped. I started pacing. Everything was crashing in Clark's journal, the photos, the basement tunnel, and now the name Lucas. Night fell. The rain started again. Lightning flickered through the sky. Just as I lay down to sleep, I heard that same soft knock at the window. Tap, tap, dot. But this time, it didn't feel scary. It felt familiar. I walked to the window slowly. Nothing was there. But then I heard it. A soft, broken whisper, like a voice buried under years of dust. "You forgot me, brother." I froze. It wasn't just my breath that stopped, it was my memory. I had forgotten my own brother. Or maybe someone made me forget. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more tangled it got. I never remembered having a brother, but now it was like something deep in my mind was waking up. Like someone had stolen a piece of my past and was now slowly giving it back. Torn and incomplete. That night, as I sat alone, I could have sworn I heard someone say my name softly, like a child's whisper. Ethan. But there was no one else in the house. My eyes drifted toward the attic, and for some reason, my legs just started moving. The attic had always been shut, filled with the smell of old wood and dust. When I opened the wooden hatch and climbed up, a cold, stale air wrapped around me. I scanned the space with my flashlight, old books, sealed boxes, and then one file in the corner caught my eye. On the front, it read, Lucas H. And underneath, a small tag, Psychiatric Evaluation. My hands shook as I opened it. The first page made my breath catch. Patient believes he is being watched. Claims someone lives in the walls. Possible dissociative symptoms. I dropped the file. Lucas, he saw something in the walls. He lived in fear. And someone had labeled him crazy. But now, none of that felt like a lie. Because I had felt the same things. I moved deeper into the attic and came across what looked like an old playroom. 2 small beds, one red, one blue. A pile of worn-out toys, nearby cars, stuffed animals, and faded chalk writing on the wall. Ethan and Lucas. Suddenly, it all hit me like a wave. I didn't remember, but the memories were there, buried. And then, tucked behind an old cabinet, I found a folded, dusty piece of paper in my mom's handwriting. It said, Lucas can't be here anymore. I'm sorry. That line felt like it fell into a deep pit inside me. She sent him away, or hid him, or abandoned him. Did she know someone or something was watching Lucas? Was he in the walls? I ran downstairs, but just as I hit the first step, lightning struck and the power went out. Complete darkness. Just the sound of rain tapping against the windows, and my heartbeat in my ears. I tried finding the flashlight, but it had died too. All I had was a single candle I grabbed from the kitchen. Its dim glow flickered as I looked toward the basement. That place no longer felt like just a basement. It felt like a grave of truth. My feet moved on their own again. Each step down the stairs creaked like a scream. The rocking chair was still there, but this time it wasn't broken. It was moving, slowly, on its own. No wind, no draft. Just rocking. And in the damp dirt near the chair were small footprints, bare feet, a child's feet, leading straight toward the wall. I just stood there frozen. The candle flickered like it was scared too. It hit me. Lucas never left. Maybe he's still here, somewhere beyond that wall. Still trapped in a story no one finished. That night, something kept pulling me back toward the basement, like the walls of the house were calling me. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down, each step on the wooden stairs creaking like it was in pain. The air down there was still cold, heavy, and damp with the smell of wet soil. But tonight, it felt different, like a story left unfinished was scattered in every corner. As I reached the far end of the basement, where the walls were older and stained with moisture, I noticed scratch marks, faint, shallow, and small, like made by little hands, all pointing in one direction, outward. There was fear in those scratches, loneliness, a silent cry. Then I heard a faint voice from one corner, so soft you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. But that night, I felt everything. The voice whispered, "I waited, Ethan. You locked me in." My heart nearly stopped. I froze. My flashlight shook in my hand as I stepped closer and saw a small wooden door built into the wall, handmade, old. It was locked from the outside, but covered in scratches from the inside. This wasn't just a room, it was proof someone had been trapped here. I opened the door. A cold gust of air hit my face. Inside was a dark, empty little room. That same old smell. In the corner lay a torn teddy bear, muddy, dusty, and missing one eye. It looked like it had been held tight by a crying child for hours. And right then something inside me shattered. Memories started coming back in flashes, me and Lucas playing in the basement. I was the wild one. He was quieter, always following me. One day, as a joke, I locked him in that room from the outside. And then, I never told anyone. Mom asked, "Where's Lucas?" And I stayed silent. Maybe out of fear, maybe guilt, or maybe I convinced myself he had just left. Over time I forgot. But Lucas never did. I sank to the ground by the door, leaning against the wall, my eyes filled with tears. There was no fear now, just regret. And then, near the beam of my flashlight, a shadow slowly appeared and sat down in front of me. The face was unclear, but it looked small, fragile, still alive. It didn't move, just looked at me and said, "Now, do you understand why I come back every night?" There was no anger in the voice, just sadness. The pain of being left behind. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just lowered my head as my fingers sank into the damp dirt. The shadow stayed, and I finally turned and ran, holding my flashlight tight. I rushed toward the stairs, and just as I reached the last step, the basement door slammed shut above me. On its own, a loud bang, and I was trapped in the dark. Now only one question echoed in my mind. Had Lucas ever left the basement? Or had I been the one trapped there all along? Ethan's breathing was heavy, and his heartbeat wasn't just in his chest anymore. It echoed through the entire basement. The door above had slammed shut, and he wasn't alone down there in that damp, musty darkness. Something else was with him. Every corner felt like it was breathing. Every wall seemed to whisper a name. The flashlight in his hand started flickering, and from deep in one of the corners, a soft lullaby-like sound began, broken, tired, like a child repeating it over and over, because it was the only thing keeping them alive. Ethan stood frozen, eyes trying to cut through the dark, but what was there couldn't be seen. It could only be felt. Moments later, a shadow began to take shape in the corner of the basement. It was smaller than a person, maybe a child, and it slowly started moving toward Ethan. As it got closer, the flashlight's beam hit it. But the face was unclear, blurry, unfinished, and more frightening than real. Ethan's eyes widened. It was Lucas, his little brother, the one he had convinced himself never existed. In a shaking voice, Ethan asked, "You're still here?" And the answer came quiet, but sharp like an old wound. "Because you left me here." Those words made the air around Ethan feel heavy. His flashlight almost slipped from his hand, but he gripped it tight. Lucas's voice echoed off the basement walls, and suddenly, memories started flooding Ethan's mind-broken flashbacks, familiar sounds, moments of light. And then one moment, the one when he had jokingly locked Lucas in that little room. He had laughed while Lucas banged on the door in fear. And Ethan, thinking it was just a game, walked away. Lucas's eyes were now locked onto Ethan's. He said, "I called out so many times, Ethan, even to Mom, but no one heard." Number 1 came. Ethan dropped to his knees, hands clutching his head. Guilt, regret, and fear wrapped around him like chains. Tears streamed down his face. "I was just a kid. I didn't know. I didn't mean to, Lucas. Please believe me." But the basement didn't care for apologies. It was filled only with echoes of past pain, and the waiting silence of a spirit never set free. Lucas stood quietly, but then he smiled, and something about that smile felt wrong. It wasn't innocent. It was a smile that had burned in years of loneliness, darkness, and being misunderstood. Lucas stepped forward slowly and said, "Now it's my turn to lock you in." Ethan turned around and saw the small wooden room, the one he had once locked Lucas inside, now wide open. Its old wooden frame was glowing with a deep red light, and in a flash, something pulled Ethan inside. The door slammed shut this time, from the outside. The basement went silent. The lullaby stopped. And upstairs, Someone could be heard walking down the hallway step by step, just like Ethan used to. When the basement door suddenly creaked open by itself, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, someone was showing him mercy. Maybe Lucas was ready to forgive him. Without thinking, he grabbed the flashlight and started climbing the stairs. His heart pounded with every step, but when he saw light coming from the top, a tiny flicker of hope lit up inside him. But as soon as he stepped into the living room, his breath caught in his throat. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't. The wall colors were slightly off, the framed photos were missing, and the furniture, everything he'd grown up with, was rearranged. Like someone had shifted his home just enough to confuse him. Just enough to know something was very wrong. Panicking, Ethan pulled out his phone and called his mom. His hands were shaking. But the screen showed, "This number does not exist." He tried again, faster this time, same message. "Mom," it was like she had never existed. He ran out the front door in desperation. On the porch, something made him glance at the mailbox. He lifted the lid, and what he saw hit him like a punch to the chest. Every envelope inside had one name. On it, Lucas Haro. Ethan stumbled back dizzy. He reached up, touched his face, everything felt normal. But when he walked inside and looked in the bathroom mirror, something inside him cracked. The reflection staring back was him, but not quite. The eyes were different. The face looked a little younger, almost like a child's. And the haircut. He couldn't remember when he last got it. Slowly, the reflection started to smile. But Ethan wasn't smiling. That reflection wasn't his anymore. He fumbled for his phone and opened the photo gallery, his last hope. But that shattered too. Every photo was gone. No selfies. No college memories. No friends. Just one child's photo, over and over again, sitting in that old wooden chair in the basement. That child was Lucas. And in his eyes was Ethan's fear. It was all starting to make sense now. Maybe Ethan never really left the basement. Or maybe he came out with someone else's identity. Reality wasn't what he thought it was anymore. The person he believed he was, Ethan, was now just a memory trapped inside Lucas's mind. And Lucas was now living as Ethan. Just then, the TV turned on by itself, static buzzing across a black screen. Ethan grabbed the remote, but nothing worked. Through the static came a voice he knew, Lucas's. But this time, it wasn't scared or angry. It was calm, smug. Ethan's down there now, and Lucas is out. Ethan looked at the mirror, and his reflection began to fade. Slowly, the face looking back at him turned into Lucas. The air in the room grew thick, as if Ethan's entire presence was being erased. His identity, his memories, his existence, all slowly being deleted. Ethan had started questioning who he really was. The events of the past few days had shattered his mind and memories like glass thrown to the ground. He didn't trust himself anymore. The same question kept repeating in his head. Am I Ethan? Or was I always Lucas? Whenever he looked in the mirror, he saw something unfamiliar in his own eyes. His connection to himself felt lost in a fog. When he tried talking to neighbors, they either didn't answer the door or quickly looked away. One little girl riding her bike stopped when she saw him and pointed at her mom, saying, "Mom says no one lives in that house." That sentence hit Ethan like the ground disappearing beneath him. He felt a strange pull toward Mr. Clark's house, now abandoned and covered in dust, like no one had lived there for months. Clark's chair was empty, the windows were shut, and the whole place was still. Inside, Ethan found an old box with a dusty camcorder tape inside. Without thinking too much, he took it back to his house and played it on his old TV. As the video played, his breathing quickened. It showed Ethan, but much younger, maybe 10 years old. The camera was a little shaky, but the footage was clear. In the video, young Ethan was seen locking his little brother Lucas in the basement as a joke. From the other side of the door, Lucas was crying and knocking. "Ethan, please open the door. It's dark. But young Ethan just walked away. And the video cut out. Cold rushed through Ethan's veins. This was the moment his mind had buried for years, a mistake so big, his brain had tried to erase it. The video made it painfully clear. Ethan had locked Lucas in the basement to scare him. It wasn't just an accident, it was jealousy maybe. Even anger. Maybe Lucas got more attention from their mom. Maybe he was just too innocent. But what happened wasn't a harmless prank. It was one brother unknowingly erasing the other. Ethan was broken. He banged his head against the wall, fighting with himself, screaming, "That's not me. I didn't do that." But the video kept playing, over and over, slapping him with the truth. The guilt began to consume him. His screams no longer had anyone to hear them because the only one who could was already gone. The one who was once Lucas had now become Ethan. The camera slowly zoomed in back to that corner of the basement, where an old wooden rocking chair was gently swaying. Someone was sitting in it. The face wasn't visible, the head was bowed, hands resting quietly in the lap. Was it Ethan? Or was it Lucas? At this point, there was no way to tell. Maybe they had become the same person, a forgotten mistake that had swallowed its own identity. In Tacoma, it feels like the rain never stops. Day or night, the sky keeps pouring down like it's trying to wash away the truth hidden inside that house. The one that's been holding onto something for years. But some stains don't wash out with water. That house now sits silent and empty. In one of the quietest corners of town, 1438 Pine Street. Ethan Harrow's home. To most, it's just an abandoned property. But to the kids around town, it's a ghost story. Students from the nearby school say that late at night, when everyone's asleep, the lights upstairs turn on by themselves, and from the basement, they hear a child whistling. Always at 2:14 a.m., every night, there's still a faded poster hanging on a wall downtown. Ethan Harrow, missing. Age, 22. Last seen on a rainy night inside that same house. The case has gone cold. No witnesses, no clues. And strangely, there's no official record of Ethan's mother. No hospital files. No school records, no ID, nothing. As if she never existed. Mr. Clark, the only neighbor who ever saw Ethan last, has also vanished in the past few weeks. His house is abandoned now too, but in the attic, a diary was found. On the last page, in Clark's handwriting, there was only one chilling line. There were 2 boys, but only one stayed human. The sentence feels like it's peeling back a dark truth, but it never fully tells it. Months later, on a stormy night, the house made headlines again this time. Because a passing delivery boy swore he saw the porch light on. As he walked closer, he thought he saw a piece of paper sliding out from under the front door. That note, soaked in the rain, held only one question. The ink had bled a little, but the words were still readable. "Can I come back now, brother?" People in town don't even look toward that house anymore. Kids are too scared to walk down that street. And the rain? It seems to have made peace with the house. It keeps falling, night after night, like it's replaying something. A moment, a memory. No one knows where Ethan is now. No one really knows who Lucas was. But everyone agrees something is still inside that house. And maybe it's just waiting for the door to open again. The cold air had returned to Tacoma. House number 1438 Pine Street had been empty for months, but now a new face had moved in. Josh, a 28-year-old graphic designer living alone. He'd rented the old place because it was cheap, and just far enough from the city to feel peaceful. The landlord had only warned him once, just a little trouble when it rains. Otherwise, it's fine. Josh liked the place right away. Creaky wooden stairs, antique-style windows, and the basement, which at first just seemed like a normal storage space. But on his very first night, while he was unpacking, Josh found the basement door slightly open. It caught him off guard. He hadn't touched it. There was a strange, musty wooden smell coming from inside, like the room hadn't been touched in years. He figured maybe the last tenant had left it open. He reached to shut it when suddenly, behind him, something fell. He turned around and saw an old worn-out toy bear lying in the hallway. He had no idea where it came from. Nearby was a torn-up diary and an old black-and-white photo of two kids. One was smiling. The other looked blurry, like someone had rubbed a finger across his face. By nightfall, the rain had started again, typical Tacoma weather. Every drop on the roof sounded like footsteps, slow and steady. Josh began to feel uneasy, but chalked it up to the unfamiliar setting. As he lay in bed, there was a soft knock on his door. 3 slow taps. Took, took. Then silence. Then a whisper. Barely audible. Ethan. Josh froze. His name wasn't Ethan. He sat up, holding his breath. When he opened the door, no one was there. The hallway was empty. But then he noticed the air had gotten colder. His breath fogged the mirror across the room. And slowly, words began to form on the glass. Don't open. Josh tried to steady himself, closed the door, and got back in bed. But curiosity was eating at him. Something was drawing him toward the basement, as if someone down there was calling for him. Moments later, he heard a faint creak. The basement door had opened just a little more. Josh grabbed his flashlight and slowly stepped forward. But when he looked down, he saw small muddy footprints leading from the hallway straight toward his bedroom. He backed away, trembling. But it was already too late. The TV turned on by itself, just static on the screen. And through the static came a voice, quiet but chilling. Ethan is downstairs now, and Lucas is outside. Josh's face went pale. He aimed the flashlight ahead, but it started flickering. Then he heard it from the corner of the basement, a soft creaking sound. The old rocking chair, moving on its own. Josh couldn't move. The camera panned slowly to the floor, then toward the basement stairs. Water dripping down each step. And in the silence, one sound echoes through the house. Took, took, took. Maybe some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. In the cold, rain-soaked winds of Tacoma, something still lingers, something that never quite washed away. Ethan and Lucas grew up in the same house, but now the real question is, who was real, and who was just a shadow of a broken mind? Did Ethan truly lock his brother in the basement, or was he just a scared child lost in the dark corners of his own past? The photos, the diary, the footsteps. Were they real, or just hallucinations fed by guilt? And if Lucas was only in his imagination, then who knocks at the porch every night? Who wrote, "Don't open," on the mirror? Is the house haunted, or is it just a prison built from one unforgivable mistake? Even now, sometimes the rocking chair in the basement moves on its own, and faintly, a child's whistle can be heard. Maybe some memories don't fade, and maybe some doors are meant to stay shut forever. The end. Or maybe not. So that was our story today. Home Alone on a Rainy Night Horror Stories. A tale that doesn't just scare you. It digs into those buried layers of memory we try to forget. The story of Ethan and Lucas reminds us that walls don't just hold bricks, they hold whispers, secrets, and unanswered questions. Are you sure you've really left your past behind? If this story gave you chills, if you're now going to think twice before stepping into your basement alone, make sure to subscribe to Chilling Talks. Here, you'll find more horror stories that don't just frighten you, they echo in your mind long after. Like the video, comment and tell us which part disturbed you the most. And don't forget to hit the bell icon. The next time it rains, we'll meet again with another story. Chilling Talks, where every story hides something unsaid.